we're going to have a little look at our strap. Now, the first thing I wanted to do was show you these, because I wanted you to see that there is such a huge difference in the quality of tri-glides or sliders. Now, I don't know if you can actually see those, but this one is a good quality fixed middle bar tri-glide. It's lovely and shiny. It's approximately, and the gaps inside of the tri-glide are 1 inch wide. It's approximately 1 inch from top to bottom as well. This is also sold as a 1 inch tri-glide. You can see it's considerably smaller. The central bar moves, which is sometimes useful, but not often. I don't like them very much. They rattle. But this is far, far inferior quality. And if you're making a strap out of tweed or faux leather or anything like that, you're never going to get it through there. So do be very careful when you're buying tri-glides. If it's really cheap, then it's probably one of these. So now the bag that I'm making has, I've put rectangles on, so I'm not going to need the swivel clips. It's a way of reducing your costs when it comes to hardware. I will, however, show you how to use the swivel clips. Now, because I've also decided I'm going to make my strap in faux leather to match my connectors, I'm going to show you on a scrap piece how to actually fold your fabric for your strap if you're making a fabric strap. If you're making a faux leather strap, I'll show you how to do that as well. I am actually using a piece of scrap faux leather, so you're going to have to pretend that this is fabric and that it's been interfaced. And I've drawn a line centrally along the length. Now, if that's a 2 inch, if you're making the 1 inch strap, that will be 2 inches from the side. If you're making the 3/4 inch strap, that will be 1.5 inches from either side to find the center. Now, if you're making a fabric strap, you can fold the sides in so that they touch that central line that you've marked, and you can press that seam in. You're going to do exactly the same on the second side, and the 2 raw edges should butt up and meet in the middle, and you can press that seam in. Once you've got both of those seams in, you're going to fold it in half again, so all of your raw edges, you can see there, will be caught inside, so there'll be no raw edges. You'll just have a couple of folds on one side and a single fold on the other. That's a fabric strap. If you want to do faux leather, you're going to need to add something to hold it in place, because it does ping open, as you've just seen. I can't fold that and then let go of it, it unpings. So let me just show you on the end of this. This is my strap, and I've got a couple of lines of double-sided tape that I've put down either side of a single line, either side of that central line that I've created. I'm using 2mm double-sided tape, which I buy from eBay. It's used in mobile phone manufacture. Who knew? Apparently, and it works really well for me. If you think you're going to be stitching through your double-sided tape and you're worried about gumming up your needle, you can buy Teflon needles, which don't gum up, allegedly. I don't know, I've never tried them. Or you can just make sure that your double-sided tape is out of the seam, out of your stitch line, or you can buy quilter's tape, which you can stitch through, but it's a lot more expensive. So it's a kind of, I use what I think I use what's cheapest, which kind of shows what kind of a cheapskate I am. So I've got my strap, I've done all my clipping already. Now you can put as many or as few clips on as you want. I know some people like to have clips every inch, I don't. And I'm going to stitch the side that has that sort of opening first. So I've made sure that my bobbin is full. And I'm going to do my first line of stitching 1/4 inch away from the edge of my strap. And what I find it easiest is if I get into a really nice steady rhythm. However, that first side, you're going to be stopping to take off your clips, so it's difficult to kind of get into a real rhythm with it. Don't go too fast. You really don't need to go fast, and you'll get a much better strap if you take your time. And you'd be doing exactly the same if this was fabric, This is faux leather. It's an upholstery grade faux leather, so it's quite a nice thick one. I don't interface at all on faux leather unless it's very, very thin and very, very stretchy. You can see I sling the rest of the strap up over my shoulder so that it feeds onto the machine straight. If it's coming in from the side, you're always going to get a wonky line of stitching, so I'm also a great fan of contrast top stitching, so I've got a very light coloured thread in here. It's not white, it's a sort of a cream colour. I think using a contrast makes me pay attention to what I'm doing. I know my machine can stitch well, but I think if I know it's going to be really visible, I tend to be a bit more careful about what I'm doing. So we're just going to keep going until we get to the other end. Our strap. Taking off our clips as we go. And that's our first line of stitching completed. Now I'm going to go back to the first end and I'm going to do my stitching on the other side of my strap. Again at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I stitch from the same end both times because it stops, if there's any stretch in the faux leather, and there often is, the same applies to fabric as well. Even interfaced fabric will have some movement. Sometimes you get kind of almost like puckering and stretching on the front face of your strap, and it looks really unattractive. You also get straps will sometimes twist if you've got any kind of stretch in the fabric. So stitching from the same end both times means that you any stretch will be stretched the same on both sides of the strap. Now you're thinking to yourself, oh, she's stitching on the wrong side of that strap. And it's fair to say that I am stitching on the wrong side of the strap, but I'm using my finger by the side as my seam guide effectively. So I've got my fingers either side and I'm just letting the strap feed against my finger. Sorry, I've gone a bit quiet and concentrating. I'm just going to keep going. This is what I mean about a nice even pace. I just find it's a lot easier to stitch in a straight line if you've got a nice even pace, and if you sort of judder and stop and start, it's really difficult to get a decent stitch length, and you'll tend to find that your stitches change length if you stop and start and stop and start. It might only be fractionally, but it's enough to notice, especially if you're using a contrast thread. Now I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to take off those threads at the end there. and do a second line of stitching 1/8 of an inch outside of my stitching that I've already done. This isn't mandatory. This is just me. I like to do this. I think a double line of stitching just looks really smart. Again, I'm going from the same end as I started with, so that any stretch that I've created will all be going in the same direction, so I don't get any curving or puckering on my strap. Using my fingers as my seam guide. And then again on the other side. Again, using my fingers as a seam guide. And there we go. One beautifully double stitched strap. Okay, so now we're going to look at fitting our tri-glide. Now, I'm going to do this, I'm going to clip it rather than stitch it, because I actually am not going to use the tri-glide on mine. But if you push your strap through your tri-glide or your slider, if you're using fabric, fold over the end and stitch across there. Now for faux leather that will be too thick, because that will be 12 layers of fabric. However, you can usually stitch across here, which will be 8, or you can pop in a rivet which will just hold your tri-glide in place. Now what I'm going to do, because I'm not planning on putting the tri-glide on mine, is I'm just going to clip that. Now if you've got a raw edge on your faux leather strap, you can you can colour in the raw edge with a Sharpie pen. You can use edge coat, or you can use a strap end, which they look really cool actually. They look really nice. Now if we're going to use one of these, what we next need to do is pop one of those onto our strap. So you can see the tri-glide is sitting there. This is the raw edge on the strap, and my swivel clip is hanging below. So I'm going to take the other end of my strap, and I'm hoping that I'm not going to be pulling this off as I do this. I'm going to thread it up through the tri-glide on this side. This is actually not ideal for faux leather, this one. So we now have our swivel clip on a sort of a loop there. You can see it's sitting at the bottom. And having threaded it up through one side of our tri-glide, we're then going to thread our strap in through the other side of our tri-glide. I'm not going to pull it too tight because I want to take it out in a minute. So now you can see we have, well, we would have if I got it sitting right. We have our tri-glide, we have our swivel clip, and on the other end we fit the other swivel clip on. And again, if you're using fabric, fold over 1/2 inch and then stitch through, or add rivets if that's what you prefer. And what you end up with is an adjustable strap that you can then fit to your D-rings on either side of your bag. Now, because I'm using rectangles and I don't like to see swivel clips on a rectangle connector, I'm not going to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this hardware off. Just unthread this. I shouldn't have pulled it as tight as I did. So what's the benefits of using rectangles as opposed to D-rings? Well, D-rings you need to have swivel clips as well. Rectangles you don't. Now, if I were going to use the slider on my bag, I'm going to take that one off. What I'd do is I'd fit the slider in exactly the same way. I'd bring my strap in from underneath my rectangle. So my slider is sitting there. You can see that that's the raw edge on the inside. And I would, oh, excuse me, I'm going to go and answer the door. Okay, I'm back. I do apologise. That was the door. But it's a good job I did, because I suddenly realised I've got my strap around the wrong way. So back to where we were, in so much as I've got my swivel clip, my slider fitted onto my strap in exactly the same way as I did when I used the swivel clips. But rather than coming up, I apologise, we need to go down through our rectangle. And then we'll take the other end of our strap, and in exactly the same way as we did before, we go up through the slider, tri-glide, whatever you want to call it. We go up, through, and then through the other side. I'm not going to thread it through the other side. And then when we get to the other side of the bag, we'll go up through underneath, fold over, pop a couple of rivets in, and what you end up with is an adjustable strap that hasn't got any swivel clips on it. It's just got the rectangles. So the choice is yours. You can make a fabric strap, you can make a leather strap, you can use swivel clips and D-rings, or you can use just rectangles. You can use a slider, you can choose not to use a slider. These are all personal preference things, and it depends who it's for. If it's for you, then you can set your strap to the length that you like it. That's what I plan on doing, and just fit it with either rivets or stitching, depending on. I'm just going to pop a little bit of glue onto my thread ends there, because I'm going to use some strap ends, assuming I can find some strap ends. We will see. Just want to glue those ends down. But that is basically how to make your Ricochet bag. And I hope you've enjoyed my videos, albeit they somewhat random. And I apologise wholeheartedly for the random bit in the middle where I literally videoed my own face. It just goes to prove I don't edit my videos. You get what you get, the way it's real sewing, and you get what happens on that day. So that is your finished Ricochet bag, and I think she's properly stylish, except for it's not finished. Suddenly realised one thing that we haven't done. We haven't stitched up the inside of our zipper pocket. So I've opened my bag, I've opened that zipper pocket, and what I'm going to do is I am going to pull out those linings. And we should have, if I open that zipper properly, we should have that fold in the bottom of the linings that we made earlier on. And this will make it so much easier to get a nice finish on the bottom of your bag. So match up those two folded edges. And then you can either stitch along by hand, and you can use a ladder stitch so that it doesn't show, or if you're like me, by the time I got to this point, I think hand stitching is just not going to happen. And stitch along the bottom of that pocket. Using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure that you don't use very bright coloured thread here. Make sure it's something that coordinates with your pocket. Otherwise it just draws attention to the fact that there's stitching at the bottom of the pocket, and people then go and investigate. I find with most of my friends, when I've given them a bag or they've bought a bag, they can't figure it out how it's made. They can't figure out how you've turned it, how you get the lining in. Even those that are dressmakers don't get it. So trim away any threads. Pop that pocket lining back into the zipper pocket and push out those bottom corners. When you look in there, you can actually not see nothing obvious. And you can do your zipper pocket up. Push everything back into the bag. And what you end up with is a perfectly fitted lining. Very difficult to see actually, but I can promise you it's a perfectly fitted lining. It sits beautifully snugly inside of the bag. And that's it. I'm just going to go and pop a couple of rivets to hold my strap in, and that's me done.